Uh, Hello everyone. Thank you for choosing to view this presentation. I am Karthike Uday, and this is my final project for the course Machine Learning that I'm doing at CU Boulder for my master's in data science. For the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I'll be talking about machine learning and its applications in the field of books and literature and what I have done specifically in this and some of the interesting findings that I found out during this process. So let's get to it. Books and literature have been around us for much longer than machine learning or data science. And uh, books represent or capture the imagination of a certain time period in a certain location. They are kind of a time capsule in that way. You can analyze books from a certain period written in certain part of the world and kind of understand what people in that region were going through. And so there has been a lot of interest in analyzing texts and trends in literature over years to understand history as well. And most of the analysis has always been an analytical thought process, but there can be room for computational analysis as well. And that's where data science and machine learning can be useful in books and literature. Once we get past the processing of text data or any information that is related to books in a language that a computer can understand, which is essentially numbers, we can do a lot of applications in the field of books and literature. Uh, for my project, I have mainly focused on two different aspects. One is the popularity of recent books, and for this, I've used New York Times bestsellers as my database, and the other is to explore different writing styles of different authors, and that will be something I'll share as well. So let's get to it. So, like I said, my base data for my project has been New York Times. So New York Times gives publishes its bestsellers across fiction, nonfiction, young adult, and advice every week. And I've got the data from their API, which is nothing but an application platform interface, which allows you to access their data through a server. And I've gotten data from around 2007 till now, uh, the bestsellers for every week. So you get the rank of a particular book on their bestsellers list, what the previous rank was, the author of the book, and of course, the genre, which is fiction, nonfiction, or advice, and that kind of information. And I collected further information from Google Books. Google Books is an online digital repository which gives access to information such as subgenre of the book or the ISBN or the publication date. And this is some other useful information that I got from Google Books. And I got some additional information from Wikipedia as well, cleaning the data in a way that we can interpret it and visualize the data. There can be things like uh, what if an author is a book is written by two people? I had to split it from primary author and secondary author, and sometimes the dates are not formatted correctly. They needed to be redone in a way like this. And uh, then when it comes to text data, that's where the it becomes a little more intuitive than just the previous examples. So in order for a computer to understand text data, the text needs to be put it in a format of numbers. And one way to do it is doing kind of like a word frequency. So for example, this is the description of each book that I got from New York Times. And I have to clean it first, which is making sure that every word is a word. And sometimes things like in a on the these don't really add any value to the text, so we need to take them out. And then we essentially build a vocabulary of the entire text and we count the frequencies of the words. This is a way of storing information from text into a tabular format that can be used for machine learning algorithms or any sort of algorithms. Then it did a little of data visualization on New York Times bestsellers to find out which authors have been the bestsellers in the recent times and the books that were the best selling in recent times. And it's pretty evident from here that James Patterson, Danielle Steele, Christine Freehan, they have been the best selling authors in recent times. And when it came to books, it was The Glass Castle, Where the Cowards Sing, Outliers, and that kind of stuff. This is another interesting visualization, which is called a word cloud, where you can find out uh, the most occurring words in a set of documents. So if I look at all the descriptions that were written on New York Times bestsellers, I can visualize the general trend of words that are being used to describe a book in New York Times bestseller. Next, I wanted to analyze different writing patterns and see if it's possible to do it using machine learning algorithms. There are so many authors, and I wanted to see if the writing styles differ based on the nationality of the authors. Do English authors write differently than, say, American authors because of the different geographical location that they're set in? And does it also depend on time frame? Do authors from 1800s write differently than authors that are there now? And one way to do this is to do clustering. Clustering is exactly what it sounds like, which is clustering different data points into segments that are closer to each other. And this closeness is calculated by a distance matrix, which can be as simple as Euclidean distance, or sometimes it can be complicated like a cosine similarity. So there is some information on the maths and the idea behind clustering. So for my particular analysis, I took 5 different authors: Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, Stephen King, Emily Dickinson, and Louisa May Alcott. And just from looking at, so I got different books that were written by them, the whole text of books. So for Jane Austen, you can think of the whole text of Pride and Prejudice, or for Louisa May Alcott, the whole text of Little Women. And if you look at uh, the words that they use frequently, you can see that there are a lot of common things, but there are also something very peculiar and particular about that author that they write. For example, gentleman is not a word that you would think would come up often in anyone's writings, but it's true for Charles Dickens. And using that, I clustered all these books into whatever segment. So I did it two ways, and both the ways yield the same results. They do give each author into one cluster. So this is a good diagram that you can look at to visualize the whole picture. So one interesting thing that I found here is that uh, Christmas Carol, which is a book written by Charles Dickens, is not clustered with his other works, but is more closer to Emily Dickinson. And that's interesting. And as you can see, Jane Austen and Emily Dickinson are more similar than they are to Stephen King, Louisa May Alcott, or Charles Dickens. And that can be explained because Jane Austen is a British author and Emily Dickinson is a poet. So they might have some similar vocabulary compared to the other 3 authors. Um, then I did something else, uh, which is I wanted to understand the genres and subcategories of books and find associations with them. And for that, I did association rule mining. Uh, I essentially got data from New York Times bestsellers list. I got the year they were the bestseller in, the genre, the subgenre, and then I did an association rule mining to see which genres are associated with which year in what category. And when I did that, so for fiction, I got things like science fiction, romance, thriller, and historical fiction. And for nonfiction, I got things like biography and autobiography, history, political science as the major categories. And for help or advice, I got cooking and health and fitness and self-help. The other interesting part of this analysis is you can look at it by year. You can see how nonfiction is associated to what category the most in one particular year and make interpretable results out of it. So this is for advice. And so in 2022, it was cooking. In 2017, it was health and fitness. In 2016, it's health and fitness. In 2021, it's cooking again. In 2020, it's cooking again. This can be linked to maybe the pandemic. Once the pandemic started, people had to cook, developed cooking as a hobby. So the advice associations kind of shifted from health and fitness to cooking. And when it came to nonfiction, the pattern was that pre 2018, a lot of it associations were related to biography, autobiography, and history. And from 2018 to 2022, because of the elections, there was more interest in political sciences. So, like I said earlier, of how books capture the imagination and the state of the society at that particular time. This is a good analysis to find out based on bestsellers and associations to find at what time what genre people are really into, and that's an interesting application. Then I used different prediction tools to on New York Times bestseller descriptions for fiction, nonfiction, and young adult to see if I can predict the genre or the category of that particular book based on the description that's written in the New York Times column. And this is for fiction, this is for nonfiction, and this is for young adult. And a lot of the words are kind of what you would expect. Uh, and when I did, I was also able to extract words that define a particular genre. For example, if you look at this, book and series are majorly the words that describe fiction novels, and whereas something like a memoir or American or Time author, these are for nonfiction. As you can see, it does really good with text data. It's not able to separate young adult from fiction because a lot of the words are similar, but it does a good job of doing fiction and nonfiction. And this kind of gives us an idea of the kind of data that these algorithms work well with and the kind of data they don't really do well at separating. Another thing that I did is to try and predict the price of a book, but I did not have enough data to do it. And I tried to predict it with the New York Times bestsellers rank and the number of weeks it has been on that list, the genre it belongs to. But I couldn't really do a great job at it because the data that I have, it just means that New York Times bestsellers ranks do not determine the price of a book. And yeah, to conclude, machine learning and data science have a wide range of applications in the field of books and literature. And you can do both unsupervised, like clustering and association rule mining, to find patterns and uh, trends in literature. And you can also use supervised learning, which is like a prediction based model, like to separate fiction, nonfiction, and advice, like I did, to build interesting models that can predict even more things. I didn't have enough data to do it, but you can find, you can sort of try to predict books that have a higher resurgence, and you can sort of see what makes a book stand the test of time. And these are so many applications that are there in the field of books and literature when it comes to data science.